All right, let's jump right in to the debate.
If you have student loans, you'll know very well that there's something you haven't had to do since March 2020 and the start of the pandemic. You haven't had to make any payments on your federal student debt because there's been a moratorium on those payments that started during the Trump presidency and continued into Joe Biden's. At the end of this month, the pause on federal student loan payments is set to expire. Again, out of 40 million total borrowers, 27 million have stopped payments since 2020. But after over 2 years and 7 extensions so far, they'll have to pay up again starting September the 1st. This looming deadline brings a host of questions like, will the White House extend the pause for an 8th time? If I fake my own death, can I finally escape my student debt? And more seriously, didn't Joe Biden promise to forgive my college loans if he was elected president?
We already
watched the answer to that last one is yes, kind of.
That's why I'm going to eliminate a lot of your student debt if you, in fact, if you come from a family less than 125 grand and you went to a public university. I'm going to make sure that everybody in this generation gets $10,000 knocked off of their student debt as we try to get out of this god-awful pandemic.
Here's what's interesting. The Biden administration has already, in fact, canceled some college debt, almost $10 billion worth, but only for a select population of students.
Not even 1% of the debt.
400,000 borrowers had their loans wiped after the Department of Education determined they were defrauded by their alma maters, mostly for-profit colleges, which is a reminder that the Biden administration does have the legal power to do this and knows it has the legal power to do this. So, what about the other 39 million plus borrowers? What about this broader population of grads, those who weren't the victims of any fraud? Senators Chuck Schumer and Elizabeth Warren have called in the past on Joe Biden to cancel $50,000 of student debt. But the White House has indicated that Biden is still open to canceling $10,000 of debt for borrowers, but only those who meet specific income requirements. It'll be means tested. For some, that'll be a welcome and much needed move. For others, it won't go anywhere far enough, especially considering that borrowers under the age of 35 owe over $600 billion in collective federal student debt. And the amount of debt per borrower has increased more than 300% since 1970. This crisis also disproportionately affects people of color, with 10% more black adults reporting federal loan debt than white adults. So it's a real equity issue and a real financial problem. Joining me is former Ohio State Senator Nina Turner, who also served as national co-chair of Senator Bernie Sanders' 2020 presidential campaign. Also here is former conservative radio host, now the Bulwark's editor-at-large, Charlie Sykes.
Hey, by the way, former conservative radio host and now lib grifter. He's saying don't do student loan debt. He brought no voters with him. He didn't bring a single voter with him, but we have to listen to his politics now. Yay! MSNBC, yay!
Sykes, who's also an MSNBC contributor. Thank you both for joining me. Nina, one of the most common critiques of student loan forgiveness is, it's really expensive, who's going to pay for it? What's your answer to that?
This should be considered part of a social contract. In the same way, in this country, we finally decided that K through 12 education should be taken care of by the taxpayers. We must do the same thing right now for the 45 million people who have that student debt. And then beyond that, making sure that college and universities are tuition free so that people don't find themselves in this dilemma. The whole notion of going to college was really about people trying to change the trajectory of their lives. And so in doing that, they should not be saddled with debt for the rest of their lives. The way that college and universities have to be paid for through loans is nothing but a scam, a giveaway to the banks, and it is a burden on the American people. And just as there was no hesitation to bail out Wall Street, it is time to bail out people in the hoods all over this country, whether they're rural, urban, or suburban. So this is about a social contract in these United States of America.
Charlie, it's a bailout, to use Nina's phrase, that over half the country supports, at least partial student loan forgiveness, that is, including, according to one poll, a majority of adults who didn't attend college. So it's a popular policy. What is your objection to it?
Well, first of all, I think it's a legitimate problem, the cost of higher education and the access to higher education. I've written several books about it, documenting the incredible increase in tuitions over the last few years. But I have to say, these proposals are bad politics, and they are bad.
Fail you, the false promise of higher education. In other words, his solution is don't let the poors go to school. That's his fucking solution. Education is basically an investment in the future of your nation. Making the generation that you're depending on to hold you up in the future pay for the privilege is fucking insane. Furthermore, this happened to me, and I'm sure it's happening to many of you. They'll tell you this is what you have to do, and everything will just work out. All right, you ready? Here it is. Growing up, you go to school, you stay off drugs, and you stay out of trouble with the law. You get good grades, right? And then you go to college. Once you finish college, you get your job in your profession. It'll be an entry-level job, so you won't make a lot of money. Then about 5 to 10 years in your career, when you get the major step, when you get enough experience that you get a step up in your salary, you buy your first home. You should be around 25 to 28. That range is when you buy your first home, you get married, and you have your first child. That's the fucking that is what boomers expect. That is the boomer path. Maybe you get married a little bit earlier if you find someone in high school or college that's your sweetheart, but basically that's it. You have your first child by your mid to late 20s. Now, let's talk about reality here. You graduate college in America, you probably have so much student loan debt, you can't afford to even rent, let alone save for a down payment. Number two, half of the people can't find jobs within their chosen profession. Even, yes, engineers and programmers. Even if you do find a job, compensation has been flat for decades. So your compensation is not going up, unionization is going down, but you also now, instead of having a home at 25, you have a student loan payment that you're expected to pay off in 10 to 15 years. So instead of being halfway, 15 years from now, instead of being halfway into, paying down your mortgage, you are fucked because you didn't have a house. So those people that were able to buy a house, they see their net worth increasing because the asset is appreciating faster than inflation. So if you were a boomer or you were a Gen Xer and you bought a house, that house has appreciated faster than inflation. So your wealth has gone up. Meanwhile, you've had rent control. That's what a 30-year mortgage is. It's rent control. You've been paying the same mortgage you've been paying for 20, 30 fucking years. That means no rent increase. Maybe you have a little bit of an increase from property taxes or something. But you could, when you buy a home, you could be like, I pretty much know what I'm going to have to spend on my house for 30 fucking years. What renter can even tell you what they're going to pay in 2 years? So and when you pay a mortgage, that's increasing your wealth. When you're a renter, it's just a liability. Your wealth is going down every time you pay rent. So you're paying rent. Every time you pay rent, your wealth goes down, and you're paying student loans. So instead of having a asset that's appreciating in price and serving as an automatically forming nest egg, you have liability and you have a rental charge. Your finances are upside down automatically. You didn't do anything differently, except instead of being able to buy a home and have cheap tuition at college, you're fucked. That's why everything's fucked. Because for boomers, society was set up so that they auto-won if they just did the basics. That's why boomers don't understand our generation. Because the system was set up to work for them. If you were a, middle-class person, the system was set for you to auto-win with just doing the basics. Now, unless you get help from, your parents or a previous generation, or you win what amounts to the lottery in life, you're fucked. It's just that simple. So now the system is set up that if you listen to your parents, you will be fucked. The only people that I know that in my life that are really successful are those people who They picked a profession that randomly exploded, like randomly went up in demand. Number one. Two, they got massive full ride scholarships, or their parents paid for their college. The IT Dragon, thanks for the 10 months. Everyone else is dying under student loans. If someone doesn't have student loans, they are fine. If you don't have student loans and you have a job, a decent job, you probably be able to save for a home at some point. Which then, once you're on the property ladder, your value is as housing prices double, your wealth doubled. You didn't do anything. You weren't smart. You didn't make a savvy investment. You just bought a home to live in. And whoops-a-daisy, now you have $100,000 extra. But you didn't have to take out those loans. You chose to go to college. And that's the difference between this generation and the last generation. This generation, if you listen to what you were told, you're fucked. And then they say you're stupid. I can't believe you did what your parents and grandparents and teachers and guidance counselors told you to do. Dummy. I can't believe you did what everyone said to do. You're so dumb and responsible now. Meanwhile, a boomer could fucking not even go to college, graduate high school, and go to the fucking mill and get a pension after 30 years with a high school diploma. My family pressured and shamed me into $170K in loans. Then they told me it'd be trashy to become a tattoo artist like I wanted. Now I'm trashy with several useless degrees. Do what you are passionate about is the first thing I'd say. Mike, you forget that people live in places like California. No one is buying a house. Oh, did no one live in California in 1965? News to me. I'm passionate about claims adjusting. Also, this is another thing I'm going to say. Your job doesn't have to be your passion. Your job is a job. You don't have to get self-actualized from work. Be self-actualized from, I don't know, helping overthrow capitalism. We also do a terrible job of educating young people in real-world personal finance. Barely anyone my age knows anything about debt, loans, etc. It really fucks people. Also, even if you educate... You know what solved my debt problem? By the way, I'm the most educated person on personal finance that you could be. I worked in securities arbitration, which meant I helped people sue their brokers. I know every single type of advanced investment. I know everything you can know about finance. And yet, you know what solves my debt problem? Making more money. Like there is no like, oh man, there's some neat trick to fix the problem of your rent, your housing, your food, your reasonable leisure expenses are greater than your transportation, your health care, etc. is greater than the money you make. There's no way to fucking square that circle, man. There is no way. And if you think that saying to people, well, you didn't live like a monk is why you're poor, is the dumbest ass motherfucking shit I've ever heard. And it proves to me you've never met anybody rich in your life. Every person I know who's wealthy or makes money spends more time lounging around than anybody I know that is poor. By a long shot. Rob Billionaire says, I bought a house at $497K 1.5 years ago with a 2.37 interest. Now Redfin says it's worth $656,000. Just be yourself, bro. It's easy, bro. There you go. You're a genius. You figured it out. Wow, what an ingenious you are. So smart. Let's go back to the debate.
Public policy, some of the giveaways, some of the bailouts would be regressive. Most of the benefits would go to upper income individuals. They do not address the underlying problems of the cost of higher education or the accessibility. And keep in mind that these proposals do not wipe out the debt. They simply transfer the debt to the 220 million American adults who don't have student debt. They do not make college cheaper. In fact, they may encourage colleges to raise their tuition. It's backward looking. It doesn't help future borrowers. And because it sets a precedent of forgiving the loans, future students may expect another loan forgiveness, so take on more debt going forward. That's the concept of moral hazard. And in terms of the politics, there are a lot of polls out there, but I will tell you that this is going to be quite unpopular with and unfair to, and you mentioned this before, people who, millions of people who do not have student loans, people who never went to college, people who paid off their student loans, people who chose to go to community colleges rather than more expensive colleges. And I think that it may also hurt the future student borrowers as well, Look, the reality is that forgiving $50,000 would cost $1.5 trillion. $10,000 forgiveness would cost about $300 billion. You could actually, for that, cut a check to every adult American for $1,500. And unfortunately, this is not targeted to all the people who need it. There are a lot of people out there.
So everything he just said was fucking stupid. Every single thing he just said, every single argument he made was dumb as fuck. First, let's talk about the politics, because this is the most important part. The question is, if you're a non-student debt holder and somebody else's debt is forgiven, does that piss you off or affect you in any way? The answer is no. How do I know this? Because we just forgave $800 billion in PPP loans to the richest Americans and biggest corporations. And nobody cares. Nobody cares. But that was targeted for the rich. That went to the rich. So, number one, bullshit. Second of all, would that make anybody happy? Well, this is an anecdote, but I'll tell you personally, if Joe Biden forgave my student loans, I would become a Biden stan. I would put anarcho-Bidenist in my fucking profile. I would call Joe Biden the best president ever and begin to make propaganda. Now, guess what? He's not going to do it because he's a piece of shit, so it's not going to happen. But if it did, that would earn my undying love. And I would even vote for him in 2024 and tell you to do the same. Hashtag Peepo settle. So, and what am I trying to communicate here? This is the concept of how politics works. There's something called diffuse costs and concentrated benefits. And for the longest time, Republicans have been wielding this as their secret to power. Here's an example: abortion. The vast majority of people in this country don't want abortion rights taken away. But 30% of people are psychotic single-issue abortion voters. So the Republicans, by being outside the mainstream on abortion, they pick up all these people that are obsessed with abortion and they vote for them relentlessly. Now, the rest of us who are normal, abortion is just on our list of things that we care about. There's very few single-issue abortion voters right now. Maybe that changed with the overturning of Roe v. Wade, but I'm talking about retrospectively, so let's not get off track. Same thing with guns. Republicans, the vast majority of people support gun control. But there's 5 to 10% of the population who's obsessed with guns, want to fuck their gun. They're ammo-sexuals. The Republicans, by being outside the mainstream on guns, can count on that group. So now you see their strategy. They don't have a program that appeals to a bunch of people. They have a program, they have a coalition of assembling these highly motivated blocks of people who get the benefit strongly of their point of view. Same thing with their energy policy and fossil fuels. Same thing with their drug policy and pharmaceuticals. They get billions of dollars in support from those industries because they have bad policy, but those industries benefit a lot. So all of us suffer a little bit, but all of our suffering benefits them a lot. So those people love the Republicans, and that's how they win power. So now the Democrats have the opportunity to go to every young person and every person struggling with debt and change their lives. That'll be a moment in time that every one of those people could be. I remember when Joe Biden forgave my student loans. That changed my life. That changed the trajectory of my financial life. My entire life would instantly change forever. You're telling me somebody who doesn't have student loans is going to hate Joe Biden as much as I love him? Impossible. Illogical. Now let's talk about the other stuff. The moral hazard shit. Retrospectively and all that other shit. Boomers don't have student loans because college was free or nearly free because of state and federal spending. Since the 80s, government funding for higher education has been slashed. That explains nearly all of the increase in tuition. It isn't fancy dorms. It isn't computers. It isn't administrators. It isn't safe space meditation rooms. It isn't services. It's state funding cuts. You don't have to take my word for it. This is a factual argument based on facts. Let me look at the data right now. I want to show you. I want to show you this. Hold on. Let me find it. I know I'm losing. Here it is. Here it is. Changes in funding and tuition at public universities. So this is just from 2000 to 2014. Colorado current tuition. This is back in 2014. $15,800 per year. That's a double in the increase in their tuition. What about state funding per student? State funding per student dropped $7,800. The share of tuition hike explained by budget cuts, 101.3%. That means that Colorado public universities, tuition actually went up less than their funding was cut. They gained in efficiency. This is the facts. So when Charlie Sykes says, oh, it's unfair, moral hazard, it wasn't a moral hazard when Gen X and the boomers got a lot more money up front so that everybody else in society paid for their education, paid for this dumb fuck's education, paid for this boomer fuck's education. That was fine when they did it straight up front. But no. Years of people being financially devastated by student loans getting relief, that's moral hazard. Isn't that funny, that self-serving piece of garbage? He talks, but he lies. Now, what else is there? Oh, what else did he say? Oh, future students. Yeah, no shit. We should forgive student loans and also pay for future students. You got it. It's morally reprehensible to charge people for education. At least the amounts that we do, that puts them in financial pain, you fucking scum. So we talked about the politics. We talked about the moral hazard. We talked about the reality of fairness. What else? Oh, the other issue is it goes to higher income earners. Yes, people with an education make more money than people who don't. Many of the people who don't have an education decided not to get one because it cost too much money and they couldn't afford to go. Now, they just so happen to support forgiving student loans higher than the rest of the population. So the people who don't have any student loans and never went to college support getting rid of student loans at a higher rate than the rest of the population. Why is that? Because they wanted to go, but they couldn't. So your system is immoral because it keeps... And this is the thing that really pisses me off. There are people right now who are outstanding students who have a passion for education who don't go because of financial reasons. That is a morally reprehensible situation that pieces of shit like this scumbag created. You know how I think people should decide on whether they should go to school or not? Their academic performance. Not, oh, my dad is wealthy, I guess I go to college now. And as far as the other thing, if a rich person gets their student loan debt forgiven, say they make $500,000 a year and they get $75,000 of student loan debt forgiven, tax them, raise taxes on the rich, and they'll pay more than $75,000 in taxes back. We see you tax people who make a lot and you fund a robust civil society that works for the rest of people. See? So that'll make income inequality better. So why are we forgiving student loans of people that make a lot of money? Because income doesn't necessarily mean wealth, number one. Two, income is variable. Just because you made a lot of money one year doesn't mean you're going to make a lot of money the next year. Third, tax them. Solution made. So all of this. So what points does he have now? State support for higher education per full-time equivalent. Display year. Okay, this is 2020. We're adjusting values for inflation. Let's go back to 2000. The bottom quartile of the year 2000, adjusted for inflation, was $4,200. Now in 2020, the bottom quartile is 2,000. You can see it right there. Massive funding cut. It's just a fact, bro. And then there's the other question. Here's the other question. And I'm going to call it the biblical argument. The Bible says we should do a debt jubilee every 7 years. Doesn't sound very Christian of you, Charlie. All right, let's keep going.
Who are suffering with debt, who are unemployed, who may be suffering with medical debt, and they will not be helped by this.
Okay.
So this is a social contract that deals with a very, in many of them, a privileged subset of people struggling.
Okay, you made that point. Let's Nina respond. She's shaking her head, Nina.
You know what? Let's go ahead and cancel medical debt too while we're at it. I'm glad that you laid that out there. This is not unfair. What is unfair is to continue to prop up a system that by its very nature continues to put people in a cycle of debt. And what was their crime? The simple crime of going to college. Now, there was a time in the United States of America where tuition, as you pointed out, was not as high as it is right now. And I know many elders who are from states like New York and California who paid nowhere near the debt, had nowhere near the college debt that people have today. So instead of looking at this as a us versus them, because that's the mentality that will get other people revved up, we have to look at this as a social contract in the United States of America, and that we need to right from wrong.
Deal with Charlie's specific point. Hold on, Charlie, hold on one second. I just wanted to get to respond to your earlier point, which is deal with the point a lot of people raise that Charlie just articulated, which is, okay, let's help poorer people, but poorer people aren't people with college degrees. There's a lot of people without college degrees who are suffering. Why not give them that money?
Poor people do have college.
By the way, chat, this is a bullshit argument. This is a bullshit argument. Bring me on this show. Bring me on this fucking show. We don't just have 1.7 trillion and that's that, and we have to divide it up. Oh no, we only have this tiny little bit of money. We can only give it to if we give it to the college students, then we can't help the poor. That's a fucking lie. That's a bold-faced lie. We just increased our military spending from 615 billion when Donald Trump entered office in 2016. It's now over $850 billion per year. Where did we get that $200 billion a year? Our fucking ass? The idea that, we have medical debt, therefore you can't forgive student debt. Medical debt is abhorrent, and so is student debt. And societies that run well don't have either.
College degrees. I'm one of them. I grew up in a family that was of the working poor. Teenage parents got married young, became a cycle breaker in my family. So I am among them. You got people right now in the debt collective. If you want to read some of the stories, this one lady tells a story of how she owns a business. She owes $72,000 worth of debt, $20,000 more than when she started. And according to her, she hasn't missed a payment. So there's something wrong with this. Wealthy people don't have college debt. The ultra wealthy, they pay for their debt. So you will, in fact, be helping the working poor. You'll be helping people who are trying to become cycle breakers. And there's a race aspect to this too, Mehdi, that I got to get out. Because Black women carry the largest amount of student debt in the United States of America. So there's a caste and class component to this too. And it is the right thing to do both economically and also morally.
Charlie.
Well, part of the social contract, though, is also, people who live and play by the rules are rewarded for it. And I think that that's something we need to keep in mind. And I will tell you, just on the politics of this, go into a room in rural Wisconsin and explain why
I don't give a fuck. I don't give a fuck what rural Wisconsin says. Eat my shit and die, rural Wisconsin. Fucking die. Oh, Mike, you'll lose 5% of the vote. Fucking die for all I care. If I ever get into power, never mind. Never mind. I can't say it. It's so funny that you have to fight the battles. By the way, rural Wisconsin, they're getting shoveled farming subsidies. When the government bennies come for farming subsidies, they've got their hand out for the corn subsidy. They got their hand out for the inheritance tax subsidy. They got their hand out for every government benny they can get. Oh, please build me an irrigation system. Oh, please, please, please. Benny. But it's good for them because they're salt of the earth. They need that money. They need that money. Their welfare, the biggest welfare queen in America is a white farmer from Iowa. And as I said before, why does nobody bringing up Paycheck Protection Program? We just forgave, what was that, $600 billion in loans to the rich, to the richest of the rich. Nobody fucking cares. Welfare for every rich motherfucker in America. Bank bailouts. The airline industry just got $50 billion in bailouts. Free money. We could come up with bailout after bailout, money after money for Wall Street. We printed trillions of dollars. That's your inflation. Honestly, I gotta tell you, chat. Honestly, I think a lot of you say like, hey, Mike, I want you to run for office. And like, here's the thing. I know that if I ever had executive authority, people like Charlie would not be able to be on TV. All right? We'd have a resort for them. Are you sure you want me in power? Because I don't have the humility that other types of leftists do. I wouldn't have the unsuredness. I would double and triple and quadruple down. I would make President Xi look like Mr. Rogers. Charlie here wants to pit one set of working class voters against another. Exactly. He's a fucking typical liberal. Divide the working class. Who profits cui bono from the status quo? Who likes student debt and loans the way it is? How come that is never challenged? How come it's never challenged? Who's benefiting from the status quo? Why are they never in this conversation? Somebody is. I'd make Robespierre look like Bob Ross. I'd be painting my paint would be of a different color. Let's just say there'd be a lot of rose. There'd be a lot of rust. There'd be a lot of maroon.
Others, when they are deeply in debt themselves. Look, this is a legitimate problem. There's no question about it. But there are other ways of doing this. There are safety nets in the federal loan program that are income driven. There are provisions in there.
You have to absolutely be fucking kidding me. You piece of dog shit garbage. We have compounding. First of all, the interest rates are 7-8%, and income-based repayment. Your interest still compounds. Your debt goes up. Your financial situation gets worse. And then what? When you're 50 or 60, it gets forgiven? Insane. Batshit crazy.
For people with low or no incomes not to have to pay the student loans. Most student borrowers.
Well, the thing about this low and the thing about Charlie Sykes and people like him, besides the fact that if there's a hell, he's going, is that they bring up the very poor to try to prevent help and assistance for other people. But when it comes to something like, I don't know, the child tax credit being applied to people with low or no income, then suddenly, well, we've got them incentivized work. Suddenly, there's no room to help those people.
I just want to ask Charlie a quick question on the politics of this. I mean, let's be fair. A lot of those farmers may not be voting Democrat anyways. If you're a Democrat, you want your young base to turn out. We know that young voters, their confidence, their support for Biden has collapsed.
Wait, what? We don't need to be... Wait. We shouldn't be scared of the other party's base? We shouldn't be supporting the other party? Well, shock of shocks.
We must do this. I didn't hear all this when it was about the military budget. We got money for everything else, but we do not have enough money. We complain about bailing out the main street of this country. This is what student debt forgiveness would do. We need to do it to lift people in this country. That is absolutely the right thing to do, and it must be done. And Charlie, we can do both. Let's deal with the higher cost of tuition, and let's cancel student debt right now. We can walk and chew gum.
We will have to leave it there. It's funny though, Nina, you mentioned the Pentagon. I'm going to give myself the last word and say, if people who didn't go to college shouldn't have to pay for people who did, do those of us who don't like foreign wars, do we still have to pay for the Pentagon? Anyways, Nina Turner, Charlie Sykes, thank you both. Always a pleasure.
So I went and looked up Charlie Sykes, and he went to the University of Wisconsin at Madison, right? He graduated in 1975. 1975. Here is from their alumni magazine. What was in-state and out-of-state tuition in September of 1956? If you could give it to me for 57, 58, 59, and 60, that would be great. My guess is this dipshit was like arguing with some relative of his and is like, I paid for my own college. Back in September 1956, student fees and tuition per semester were $90 for residents and $250 for non-residents. Rates went up in 58.70 to $100 for in-state and $275 for out-of-states. 2 years later, rates rose to $110 and $300. Since 1969 to 70, tuition and fees have increased each year. In the fall of 2013, undergraduate fees and tuition per semester were $10,000 for residents and $26,653 for non-resident. Let's do a inflation calculator, chat. So in 1960, it was, and then we'll do the date that we have here. Instead of this year, we'll do this year. So 2013, I purchased an item for $110. The item would cost, let's calculate, $865.72. Instead, it was $10,000. Yo, boomers. That means somebody reached in their pocket and they spent that $9,145 to make up the difference. That was the state government. Guy that year graduated was $500 per year. Tuition. Graduated in 1975. This is 75 to 77. Tuition was $506 per year. $506 per year. Let's go ahead and throw that in an inflation calculator now. $506 a year. If tuition at the University of Madison, Wisconsin was $2,191, like it was when you went to college, Charlie, then yeah, student loan debt wouldn't be a problem. What was the minimum wage in 1975? Minimum wage in 1975 was $2.10. Let's go ahead and do an inflation calculator now. $2.10. $2.10. That would have an $11.56 minimum wage. Our minimum wage is $7.25. Boomers, it was easier for you. So when you have these facts, you don't need to get mad at me for telling them. I know you've never been told them in your entire life. You think the younger generation has it easier than you because we have phones or something. In reality, the minimum wage was higher back then. The cost of housing was lower. The cost of a car was lower. The cost of tuition was significantly lower, 5 times lower than it is today. Things made sense to you because it was easier to get a job, a union job, make a good salary, and afford the necessities of life. It's not true anymore. And it's because of policies that happened when you were the ones voting for the politicians that made them. You voted for Reagan. You voted for Clinton. You voted for both Bushes. You voted for Trump. You have created a society where your kids and grandkids are worse off than you, and you did it for yourself. Look in the mirror. Look in the goddamn mirror. Aren't you misdirected to blame here? Don't you understand, as leftists, is about systems and institutions that brainwash the people? Seems counter to what Michael Brooks has always preached. My point is that the people that fall for this idea of moral hazard or all the other bullshit Charlie Sykes said believe that they did it this way and the younger generation is just not pulling their own weight. Meanwhile, it was their parents and grandparents, the greatest generation, the people that fought and beat the Nazis and elected FDR. They created a system so that boomers could go to college for free or nearly free, that they could work a summer job at a fucking ice cream stand and pay for their college tuition. And they took that, lost in Vietnam, and then dismantled those safety nets and said, fuck you, got mine. Are you watching the stream unsubbed? You're making income inequality worse. You are doing anti-praxis. We are the only Twitch stream that will not accept scam advertisers, and I will never fuck you over by selling you crap.